So a lot of men are feeling these feelings: guilt, shame, and regret. And that feeling can show up, especially when you get to the age of 40 and afterwards. It kind of shows up a lot more because a lot of men are getting to that point where they're evaluating their life and they feel like maybe they should have done more. And this feeling just kind of comes out of nowhere of guilt and shame and regret. And a guy described it to me a few years ago. He gave me a great description of it, and it related to me at the time. He said it was like a dark dog following him around. Didn't know why it was there. It was always showing up. And as soon as he think it was gone, this feeling just kind of just creeped into the background. And this guy was very successful, but he felt like he didn't deserve it. He felt guilty that he had this position in his job. Made no sense at the time. But it's almost like you can be going through your day as well, and you're just kind of getting through your challenges and you're keeping it together, and then suddenly you remember something that you didn't do, or something that you said 10 years ago, and that feeling that maybe you should be further along in your life than you actually are, and you start evaluating things, and this feeling just kind of lingers in the background, and it hits you right in the gut, and it's quiet, but it's heavy, and you don't talk about it, you don't say anything to anybody about it, you don't want to go to somebody for help about it. And the thing about shame and guilt and regret is that it doesn't knock on the door. It kind of slips through the cracks, and it's a heaviness that's in the background, and it gets in the way of everything that you do. And some people just struggle on. So what I'm going to do in this particular podcast is I'm going to get you to understand what you're doing in the background. Because if you don't understand what you're doing in the background, you're going to carry them feelings. Guilt, shame, and regret. You're going to carry them and you're going to carry them like they're facts, but they're not facts, they're feelings. And even more than that, they're processes. So if I show you an idea, if I give you a concept to think about something this particular way, it means I'm not giving you any techniques to do. I'm just kind of untangling all those knots. I see it like when people have issues, it's like my job is to untangle all those knots. It's like a ball of wool. And it's to untangle all of the reasoning behind everything that they're doing to get caught up in the feeling, because there is people out there and they're not struggling. Even though they've got challenges in their life, they seem like they've got it all together, and a lot of people do. And I wanted to kind of find out what is that they're doing, or what is it that they're not doing that gets them to be able to not feel these feelings for too long. But I also wanted to be ethical and like genuine. I didn't want to be numb and not give a shit about anything, because they have consequences too. These are processes. Everything that I talk about in my podcast are going to get you to realize that life is a process. Feelings are a process. You're a process. Everything is moving and everything is processing and it's transforming. And I don't want to get too technical about it, but I'm going to just kind of keep it simple, give you a gist of this. And if you just get the gist of it, life will be much easier. It means you don't have to put any effort into it, any strain into trying to just get no, I don't even like saying get through your day, because life, there has to be more to life than that, right? But to be able to get through your day and enjoy the simple things in life, even though you can have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of challenges, and even a lot of financial issues, there is a possibility that you can have all of that happening outside, but have a kind of a sense of peace inside about what's happening outside, and then show up to that challenge and go, okay, how can I be helpful here? But if you're debilitated by shame, guilt, and regret, that's going to be way more of a challenge. And those feelings are definitely going to influence the outcome of everything that you do. It's like they're a horse that's leading the carriage. It's kind of like you've got shame, guilt, and regret, and they're the horses that are leading the carriage. It's not going to be a comfortable ride. It just doesn't work well when people are using that to lead their life. So what's the horse that you want to be leading your carriage? It's just, you just want to be able to just have a peaceful, calm, aware horse leading your carriage, if you can have it that way. So to think of this as a process, let's start thinking about it like this. And again, at the end of this podcast, I don't want you to take anything away but a concept, an idea, a possibility, a plausibility, that it's plausible that you could live your life without any effort, without trying to make sense of what's going on, but just be like a kid that doesn't know how to speak English yet. They're just like showing up, something bad happens, you feel bad about it there and then, you dust yourself off, you get back up and you're out playing with your mates again. because the kid's not trying to make any sense of anything. They do feel shame, guilt, and regret, but not for long. You know, they feel it long enough to learn something and then they move on. But a lot of people are carrying that guilt, and I want to get you to think about it a different way. You're not shameful. Think about it like this. You're shaming. If someone says, I feel shameful, I feel shame, I would use different language patterns, because the language that you use is going to have a lot to do with how you feel. And I would say something like, how are you shaming yourself? Sometimes I say it. Sometimes it might come across like a bit condescending, but at the right time, if you say it at the right time, it's very effective. But in my head, I'm thinking, I wonder how this person is shaming themselves. What are they saying to keep that fire going? You know, to keep that fire in their belly going all of the time. That's feeling like shame. What is the process that they're using to throw logs on the fire? That's the first thing I'm kind of thinking is, what's the process that they're using? There's patterns to your thinking. There's patterns to your behavior. And I spot patterns. And if you interrupt the patterns, then the feeling bottoms out, it falls away, and then you can get on with your life. There has been times where you get distracted and you get on with your life and you forget to feel like shame or guilt. And then all of a sudden, when you've got a bit of time on your own, you're back in the feeling again. So that's called an interruption. When someone interrupts your worrying or your shaming, and you kind of forget about it for a while and you get on with your life. What if you could do that yourself? If you could interrupt it or just not get into it at all. Just feel it long enough, feel bad, to learn something. So that's the idea of this whole thing, is to get you to just listen to this in the background and hang out in this, because if you listen to this stuff, you're going to be training your mind to think this particular way. And how you train your mind is you use repetition, right? And also, if you use stuff that resonates with you. So if you've got repetition and resonation, those two together will start to create a belief inside of you. You know, but if you're using short form stuff like quick fixes, there's not enough stacking the deck there. There's not enough time for your neurons to start to generate neural pathways in your brain. I don't want to talk too technical here, but if you look at it like when you're training yourself to do something, your brain lights up and it's learning something. And if you spend time there, those neurons, they get bigger and they start to wire together. And they start to create a circuit. And then that becomes something that becomes long-term. It becomes automatic in the background. But if you're just doing quick things here and there, those neurons, they start to grow. But then you're off onto some other video that's showing you how to do some other technique. It's never going to work too well. It can work short-term, but this is how you want to learn long-term. Watch this stuff, listen to this in the background, and just get a way of looking at life. And I'm telling you, life will be more peaceful. And you'll get a lot more done. And if you can get stress and shame and guilt and regret out of the way, imagine how much stuff you could get done if you're not feeling those feelings. So you're not shameful, you're shaming. How are you shaming yourself? What are you saying to yourself? Just think of it like this is a process. I'm not asking you to ask yourself these questions. I'm just getting you to consider, what have you did? You're not guilty. You're guilting. How are you guilting yourself? What are you saying? How often are you saying it? Maybe you're just feeling the guilt and you're not even saying anything. You're just letting it hang out in the background there. Maybe you feel the feeling and you just keep sitting there and going, why am I feeling like this? Why am I feeling like this? And now you get caught in the why trap, because your mind doesn't have the answer. It's just going to keep giving you information that's caught up in the feeling, and you're not going to get good answers if you're in guilt. You're going to get bad answers. So getting caught in the why trap is very toxic, and it's predictable how it ends. You know, you just keep staying there and you just have a bad week instead of a bad day. So you're not full of regret. You do regret. You're regretting. How are you regretting? What are you saying to yourself? What's the story that you have in your mind that has the bad beginning and the bad ending? You know, from the past. What is it that you did in the past that didn't work out that you're replaying over in your mind now and ruining today? And probably going to ruin tomorrow and the next day if you're that good at it. That's the way I'm looking at it, is that this is a process. And if you realize it's a process, what happens after you learn this kind of way of thinking is you find you're not doing anything, but you kind of find like you're just in the background going, I feel okay, but I'm not doing anything. I'm not asking questions. Feeling will just kind of go away. If there's no news, you know, there's no feelings. If there's no story, there's no feeling. If there's no story, there's no meaning. And if there's no meaning, there's no feeling. So if you got to the point where you stop trying to fix yourself and stop just trying to figure out if you're broken and stop trying to figure things out that happened in the past or predict things that's going to happen in the future, if you just give it up, give it up, stop thinking about it, then you're going to find that your body will start to listen to your mind, because your body is eavesdropping on your mind all the time to see what you're regretting or what suffering you're doing up there, because suffering comes from thinking. It's not what's happening outside, it's how you think about what happens outside. But if you're in your mind and you're guilting and regretting and shaming, if you're doing those processes, it's pretty predictable. If you look at somebody that's doing it, it's kind of predictable. Like, what would that person be saying to themselves if they're feeling guilt? How would you make somebody else feel guilty? What way would you say it, and how often would you say it? And that's what you're doing to yourself. It's a process. And a lot of people don't realize that it's a process. They know something's happening. Sometimes even when they go for help to talk about their regrets, what are they doing? They're back inside of regretting again, talking about why it happened, understanding it a little bit more, becoming more informed, understanding who was involved, why they were part of it, why it's not your fault now. And in the meantime, I'm kind of in the background. If I was looking at this, I'd be going, could you not just get on with your life? Like, it happened, it's not happening anymore. What are you going to do about it? Is talking about it adding value to your life, or is it making you feel worse? I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just saying that there is the different ways to do this, you know. So you're not full of regret. You're regretting. That tiny shift in language makes a massive difference. And I know about language. I trained in linguistics, and I trained in persuasion and influence and deeper levels of the way people think, to understand how it could change how people think. I had to understand it. And I realized that because I know this stuff, my life became so much more simple and so much more effective, because I know how to make myself feel bad. Because I trained how to make people feel good, the same rules apply if you want to make someone feel bad. And all of that stuff I was doing to myself. I was making myself feel good, I was making myself feel bad. Then I got to the point where I realized that I'd rather just be feeling at peace. And if I want to make myself feel good, I'd like to know how to do that as well. So we will talk about that sometime. I do have other videos that teach you how to do that stuff if you really want to get into it, because I'd like to see that you're not broken. And if you realize it's a process, you'll realize you're not broken. You're doing something with your mind. You're not doing it on purpose. I'm not diminishing any of your challenges that you have in your life. People have got some really bad stuff going on, and I do get it. I know what that feels like. And my goal is to make your life better. Even though there's stuff happening outside, there's people outside that you could be helping, that you could leave this world better than it was when you came in to it. If you just understand how to rise above it and get your mind into a clear place, you'll leave the world better than it was when you came into it. That's all we all want to do. If you can make other people feel better, that will make you feel better. But first, you have to learn how to make yourself feel better first. And if you're doing it, if you're making yourself feel bad and you don't know that you're doing it, and I know that in order for me to help you, if I was working with you now, you're watching this, and you're saying, I'm not making myself feel bad. I believe you, because I know the level of thinking behind that. I know how the logical processing works behind that level of thinking. And I would go, yeah, I know that you're not doing it on purpose, but there is something happening, right? You are feeling guilt, shame, regret, whatever it may be. Just slow it down a little bit and let me try and understand, where do you feel it, when do you feel it, and what's happening in that moment. And you'll start to see that what comes to the surface is a process. And then the person becomes consciously aware of the process that they're doing. And if you highlight it, they'll go, oh my God, this is a process. It's me doing it. It's a feeling. But I'm enhancing the feeling or sustaining it because I'm putting my attention on it all of the time, and I'm asking why. What is it? Who's involved? What does it mean? And then you leave the present and you go into the future and you start putting the stuff out there. And I'll give you an example. Okay, so there was a client I worked with a few years ago. This always sticks with me. And after we were finished doing what we were doing, I'll simplify this story, right? He was feeling guilty about something that he was thinking about. Okay, and I ended up, he was feeling guilty because he thought he was going to hurt people. Right, he felt bad because he was thinking, I could hurt someone if I wanted. And then he was like, why am I thinking that? I feel terrible, like I don't want to be thinking that. And it got hold of him, and it really kind of consumed him, where he was completely exhausted. When he got to me, he was exhausted. And I said, so what's the problem? He says, I keep thinking like I could just drive along and knock somebody down. I don't want to do that. I'd never hurt anybody. And this guy was genuine. and you genuinely didn't want to do anything like that. And I said, okay, so what happens? You think about, like, you could drive along and knock someone down with your car. How do you feel about that if you did? And he says, I feel terrible. And I was like, good. What's the problem? And he goes, well, I just feel terrible. Like, I'm thinking about this stuff. And I said, yeah, you're thinking about knocking somebody down, or you could hurt somebody. But how would you feel if you did? I'd feel absolutely terrible. And I said, that's great. What's the problem? And it took him a while to kind of click with him. And he goes, I don't want to be feeling bad. And I said, well, if you weren't feeling bad, I'd be concerned, because you should be feeling guilty if you're thinking about knocking somebody down with your car. Isn't that a good thing that you feel guilty? Because what would happen if you didn't feel guilty? How would you feel? What would happen then? He says, no, that wouldn't be good. Because if you're feeling good about knocking people down, then I'd have a problem. If you're feeling nothing about knocking people down, then I'd have a problem. Or you'd have a problem. But the fact that you're feeling guilty is good, right? He goes, yeah, I never thought of it like that. And then I just interrupted the whole thing and collapsed it right there and then. I said, how good does it feel to be able to feel bad long enough, make the right decision, not to hurt anybody? And in that moment, that new information was in the process. I see it kind of like a loop, you know, thinking and feeling and thinking, and I just throw a spanner in there. And once it's in there, it goes in, and the mind can never process it the same way again, because it interrupts the loop. And at that moment, he felt like he couldn't get back into it, but I could see there was something still there. And I said to him, so that's great. So what's the problem? He goes, I don't have a problem. I said, so how do you feel? And he goes, yeah, I feel good. And I was like, I don't believe you. Something wasn't right. I said, how are you feeling? He's like, and you can tell if someone's saying they're okay, but you know they're not okay. You know, if you come home and like the wife is in the kitchen and you're like, yeah, okay. And she's like, yeah, I'm grand. She's saying she's okay with her mouth, but her body language is incongruent with what she's saying. So there's a miscommunication between the non-verbal and the verbal. Like the mouth is saying they're okay, but the body's telling you that they're not okay. Like, it's not that hard to pick it up, but I'm kind of trained to look for these little nuances in people's body language. And when they say something, I'm looking for, are they feeling it? Because if they feel it, they'll believe it. If they don't feel it, they don't believe it. So I said, you don't sound like you're okay. And I slowed it down. And I said, what would happen if you did leave here, right? I know it's done. But you left here and a couple of weeks down the road, you're thinking, shit, that stuff all done really worked. And you felt okay. And you were like, this is great. I don't worry about this stuff anymore. And you're getting on with your life and people are looking at you going, look, you look good. How do you think that you would feel in the future? And he said, I probably feel regret. And I said, regret about what? All the time I wasted, he said. So he admitted he wasn't feeling good. And I asked him how he'd feel in the future if he got rid of the problem that he had. And it's almost like he felt like he didn't deserve it, or that he hasn't earned it. And he said, I'd probably feel guilty about all the time that I wasted, how much time I wasted. And I said, so you've already decided to feel guilt in the future. How is that going to motivate him? If he's already got guilt out in the future about letting go of the problem and thinking about all the time that he wasted with his life in this problem, because he was feeling that like for a couple of years, he's not going to be looking forward to the future, because that's what we do. We take an emotion, we move it forward in time, and then it starts driving our behavior now. It's like emotional time travel. So you're not just feeling bad now, you're rehearsing feeling bad in the future. So I had to work with that. I done something else with that, and I brought him into the future. And there's a process that I know how to, whatever challenge comes up, I know how to challenge his beliefs and to be able to change how he feels about the future. Because I know the future it's not the future he's thinking about. They're thoughts of the future. That's what he's thinking about. And they're pictures that he's making in his mind of him feeling guilty in the future. So that's not very motivating. So I know how to untangle all of that. But basically, if we just thought about it like this, it would even help completely, like dissolve a lot of problems. So I said, you're not just feeling bad now, you're rehearsing feeling worse in the future for letting go of the problem. So that's what people do. They're guilting on themselves, and they're planning guilt, and they're regretting, and they have all this stuff going on in their mind. So here's a metaphor that I want you to kind of think about. And remember, what I said there is a good melon scratcher. It's a good one to think about. Like, It's good to try and figure out like how I did that and how it makes sense and how you can apply it to your life. But I don't want to make it that complicated for you with these podcasts. Just take that as like a plausibility that it's possible to just change how you think and feel about your life, because you might be thinking that your life is different and your problems are worse and you've got some other stuff going on. And I'm not denying that you do or you don't. What I'm saying is that it is possible to change these things. That guy was stuck in that for 2 years, completely knocked it out of the park in one day, in one moment, completely changed it, okay? And sometimes it takes a little bit longer, sometimes it happens quicker, but either way, you can change how you think and feel about anything. You can make anything you want mean anything you want. So here's a metaphor that I used to use with clients. It's like you have this guilt, shame, and regret. And it's like it's like picking up a piece of dog shit and you're holding it in your hands. And you're thinking, if you carry this around with you long enough, eventually, someday, it's going to make you feel better. But it won't. Because if you think about it, if you're holding on to this guilt and at some level you think if I hold on to it, it's justified, I deserve it. But there has to be a payoff to that at some level. And if you're thinking that by holding on to it, someday it's going to make you feel better. But think about the space between now and that someday where you're going to feel better or not. The space between now and that future point where you think you're going to feel better, that's the longest part. And if you practice feeling guilt or shame or regret between here and here, what are you going to get better at? You think you're going to get better at feeling better? That there's going to be some sort of person here that's going to give you a big payoff and say, okay, you've had enough. It's like you're carrying this shit around and you're thinking it's going to make you feel better in the future, but it won't. It's like it stinks. And the longer you hold on to it, the more it contaminates everything around you. It contaminates your mood, your motivation, it contaminates your relationships, and there might be other people that are saying like, why don't you just let that go? And it's like, no, I can't. I don't know how to let it go. I think if I hold on to it, I deserve it, or whatever reason that you have or holding on to it. It's like you're carrying this shit around and you think that you can't let it go. Imagine that you're carrying this shit in your hand and you're carrying it around and bringing it home and saying, look, this is just the way it is. And people are going to let it go. You're like, you can let it go, but that was just your imagination. You were imagining that shit in your hand. And your imagination is what gets your body feeling bad. So in order to feel bad, you have to make pictures in your mind and hold them in your mind. You have to construct the whole thing together and you have to make sense of it, and then your body gets this feeling. I'm not saying you're doing it on purpose. I'm not saying that there is a lot of people out there that genuinely have got issues, mental health issues. I'm not talking about those people that have really bad mental health issues. I'm just talking about the average guy out there who's just going around and they feel like they shouldn't be feeling bad, but yet they've got something going on. They can't quite put their finger on it and it just doesn't feel right, and they know there's a better way. I want to get you back into that clear space of not trying to figure all this stuff out, because life has become more sophisticated and complicated, but it hasn't become better in most cases. Just because we have more stuff doesn't mean it's better. More ways of thinking, more techniques, more therapy, more, all of this more stuff, more technology, more information. If it was about information, we should be feeling amazing, but it's not about more information, because there's enough information out there on the internet. So it's not about more information. I think it's about less. And getting back to the good old days where things were more simple and you weren't overwhelmed. Your mind's not designed to think about all this stuff. Just getting to the point where you go, you know what? I'm just going to get on with my life. I'm not going to be guilting on myself today. I'm not going to be regretting. I'm not going to be shaming myself today, because I know it's a process. And just knowing that changes it. And you're probably thinking, what do I do, Paul? Is there something I can say to myself? I just want you to get the concept that it's less is more. Sometimes it's just about just going with the flow and just keeping your attention outside and paying attention to only what's beyond the tip of your nose. But we think we're helping ourselves by holding on to these feelings. At some level, it must be helping to do something, or otherwise you wouldn't do it. But really, you're stuck in a loop. And here's the insight that I want to share with you. The only reason that you feel guilt or shame or regret is because in order to do guilt, let's just pick guilt. They're all the same, okay? They all have the same process. In order to feel guilt, it automatically presupposes that you know better. Because when you feel guilt in that moment, it means that you know that you've done something wrong. Isn't that good? Isn't that a good thing? So to do guilt presupposes you know better. You've already grown, you've already learned, you already have the awareness that you've done something wrong, and the awareness to recognize it, and that it is whatever it wasn't right, and that's good. And that's your conscience. That's a good thing to be able to have. I'm more concerned about people that don't feel those feelings. The question is how often are you feeling it? How long do you stay there in that feeling and wallow in it? And how long does it torment you in the background when you're not wallowing in it? It's just like, it just won't fucking leave me alone. That feeling goes for a moment and it just keeps going and going and going. When the feeling goes for a moment, it's like it's punishing you for something if it keeps going. All you want to be able to do when you get to that point is just stop for a moment and ask yourself, is this feeling adding value to my life, or is it getting in the way? And that feeling is there to let you know that you know better. Okay? And it's there to help you to make amends and to change your behavior, and that's great. For me, that's a good thing, because I wouldn't like to not feel those feelings. But if it's just keeping you stuck, then maybe you've already felt enough. You have to get to the time where you decide, I've learned enough from this. I've grown, and I'm going to take this awareness and do something useful with it. So it's there to let you know that you know better. And it's taking what you know better now and realizing that in the future, you're more likely not to make the same mistake again, because it presupposes that you know better. That's all guilt is there. It's there for that moment in real time to let you know that you know better. Isn't it good to know better? This way of thinking just changes the dynamics of how your body processes the feeling and the meaning. Remember, you can make anything you want mean anything you want. If there's someone out there that wants to challenge me on this, knock yourself out. All I'm saying is that if you were to think any other way, you could get to be right and miserable. Or you could think this way and get to be right and happy. Either way, I can challenge you and you can challenge me. It's a process and we both get to be right. It's a way of thinking. And in order to feel guilt, it means you know better. In order to feel regret, it means you know better. You know you shouldn't have done it. And it's taking what you know now, what you've learned from that, putting that out into the future and looking forward to not making the mistake again. Looking forward to knowing that you know better. So how would you feel if you were looking forward to knowing better, so that you didn't have to make the same mistake again? And some people, they do make the same mistakes again. But if you're not living in the guilt feeling and the shame and the regret, and you're not thinking that you're a failure, you're less likely to make the same mistakes again. It's being in a good resourceful state of mind and body. And that's where the best decisions hang out. That's where you can see things that other people can't see. You can see further than everybody else. You can see things that they've yet to see because you're in a clear state of mind. But if you're stuck in guilt, shame and regret, and you want to challenge me and you want to fight me to get to be right, you're going to be right. But ask yourself, do you want to be right or happy? That's the question. So in order to feel guilt or regret presupposes you know better. It's putting that out into the future and looking forward to knowing better, so that you know that when you get there, you're going to know better. But if you didn't feel the guilt, how would you ever know? So you're not trying to get rid of the feeling. You're choosing to stop letting it ruin your life. It's only there, and it will only last for 90 seconds if you just leave it alone and stop asking why and stop throwing logs on the fire. If you just let it be there and say, look, I've learned all I can from this. I made a mistake, feel guilty, or I didn't do anything. That guilt is just there, and I know I shouldn't be feeling it, so I'm just not going to think about it. I'm not going to try and figure it out. I'm not going to try and fix it. I'm just going to allow it just to dissolve and evaporate. And in fact, if I'm feeling guilty, that's a good thing. At least I know I can feel it. But if I didn't feel it, then it would probably be more of a problem. And the fact that I know this concept and I listen to Paul's podcast, it will give your mind enough interruption, enough new information inside of that problem to start to get it to process differently. It will never process the same way. The more you talk about something in a resourceful way, the more it's going to influence that process in the back of your mind. And your mind won't be able to stick it together again. It breaks the glue that holds it together. And the problem can never be the same way again because if you're thinking this way. So that's the message. Feel it. Let it be there. If it's genuine, just let it be there and go, okay, I shouldn't have did that. I'm sorry. But at least I know better now. I'm feeling good about feeling bad. And would you still have the problem if you could feel good about feeling bad long enough to know that you've learned something, that you learned from it, and get back to what matters, putting your attention on your family, your friends, and thinking, how can I help these other dudes? How can I be useful? How can I be truly helpful to all these other people while I'm here on this planet? I don't have much time, you know. I'm here and I've got a good few years left, but I'm going to do something with it, and living your life like that, you know, thinking about it, just allowing the feeling to be there, and letting it just do its own lifespan. Just let it go. I don't even like saying let it go, because it presupposes that you've got something. Just leave it alone. And if it sneaks back up again, just take this concept into consideration. Come back to this podcast, and eventually something will click, and it will stick in your mind. You'll go, actually, I think I get it now. Because the more you listen to this, the more it's going to influence what you know. And if you listen to it tomorrow, what you've learned today in your daily routine is going to be more than what you knew. So what you know now is going to influence what you know in the future. And everything will make more sense. You'll get more aha moments where you're going, yeah, that made sense, because today I did think like that and it did change how I feel because I've got all this new information. So even listen to it tomorrow, because every time you listen to this, it will make more sense. So if this episode landed for you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment wherever you are, or wherever you're listening or watching. If you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening on a podcast, either way is good. And if you want to dive deeper into this stuff, into this way of thinking, check out the free audios. Like, there's some stuff that I have on the website there that if you really want to dig into some cool techniques, it's not necessary, but they are cool. I do like them, and I do use some of them sometimes, and it's nice to know that you have them in your back pocket. There's free audios in there. It's like it's on a course platform. You give your email, there's videos in there, and you can go in there and you can listen to it, all the stuff, and it's at paulcampbell.ie, www.paulcampbell.ie. Right at the top of the page, you can just click the join community. You click on the button and it'll say sign up. Just sign up and you'll get access to the videos anyway when you go in there. It's kind of like a platform. You can go into the community. It's for men over 40. We're going to share some stuff in there. Just sign up for the free videos and the free resources. And in the community, we're going to go a little bit deeper into this. I'm going to do some lives, and we're going to get share information if you want. You can just sit in the background, say nothing. You can just listen. You can talk to other men if you want. I'm going to unlock that at a certain point where we can talk to each other. Let's see how it goes. I kind of want to, get a sense of what's going on first, and I'm sure you want to do the same too. And you'll get access to the group and the videos if you do that. Or you can just log in to share, to log in to get the free videos, and you'll get access to the group. That's where I share more tools, more conversations, more support for men over 40 who are ready to stop carrying what's been weighing them down and start building something better. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end of this. You've already done the hardest part. It's being able to sit down and do it the old-fashioned way like I did, and learn some stuff by being there, like in a long process of learning. That's how we learn everything in our life. We didn't learn how to walk by just watching a 1-minute YouTube video. We learned through falling and getting back up. We learned through a long process, and eventually you're here and you're able to walk, or otherwise you'd just be walking in here going, look, I'm a crawler. I just gave up after the first time I fell. You didn't do that. You're still here. You're still at this video. You've made it this far. You're successful. How does it feel to be successful this far in life? And you didn't quit. So you're not a failure, because the only way to fail is if you quit, and you're still here. Congratulations. Thank you very much for spending this time with me. And I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast or my next videos that I'm going to be putting up. Join the community, and I'll see you there, and I'll see you in the next video.